Hello everybody, this is Graeme Anderson, and today I'm going to be looking at Flotilla. Now this game caught my eye, actually, for a couple of reasons. First was the theme. Now the world has flooded and you're the captain going out to dive and trying to retrieve some resources. You know what, and maybe find some lost artifacts along the way. You're going to bring those resources back to sell to the people left on the large flotilla. And you know what, at some point you can decide to join the flotilla if you want and give up your diving ways, or you can decide to stay a boat captain for the rest of the game. Sounds like an interesting theme. The second thing that caught my eye is really the main mechanism. It's one I really enjoy. You have a hand of action cards, and on your turn you're going to be playing one to do the action. You cannot do that action again until you take that card back, and you do that by playing another one of your cards, which will allow you to retrieve all your previously played cards. If you played a game like Concordia, then you'll know this mechanism. The third thing that really intrigued me is the fact that there are two parts to the game. The sink side, where everyone starts as boat captains, but at some point during the game, you can decide to switch sides and rely on the other players still producing resources. You know what? You can choose to never switch the sky side and stay a sinksider for the entire game, and that is a completely valid path to victory. The decision on when to switch, or to switch at all, sounds like a really interesting mechanism. So, with all these things that I was intrigued by, does this game float up to the top, or is it all just waterlogged and does it just sink? Let's get it to the table, see how it's played, then we'll come back for my final thoughts on Flotilla. So here's Flotilla set up. I'll not be going through all the rules in detail, but hopefully enough that you'll understand how the game works. I'll also be showing you a setup for 4 players, but only going to be showing you one player's resources or one player's player board because of the amount of space this game takes up. Now the game of Flotilla is played over a number of rounds until all the predefined victory points are gone. There are 2 distinct modes to the game, a sink side and a sky side. Everyone starts on the sink side, but at any point during the game you can decide to switch to the sky side, but once that decision is made, you cannot go back, or you may never go sky side at all during the game. Start with the hub board with all the guild dials set to 1 and attach the appropriate dock and survival track tiles based on the player count, and place the survivor token on the topmost space of the survivor track. Place the guild board off to one side and take 1 resource barrel of each color and place it on its appropriate starting position. Place the sonar board with the sonar tracker disc on the leftmost space. Randomly select a first player and give them the first player starting tile and hand out the rest in clockwise order. Next, count out 100 victory points per player and set the rest off to the side for a last turn reserve. All other components get placed to one side. Next, you're going to select 3 objectives for the sink side, teal side up, and 3 for the sky side, which are orange side up. Now there are 3 of each objective, and place the highest victory point on top with the lowest victory point on the bottom. Finally, remove 1 artifact of each color, and the rest of the artifacts go in the artifact bag. And then all the ocean tiles go in the ocean tile bag. Next, set up the crew cards. Separate all the crew cards by their guild and tier, removing cards depending on the player count, and place all the tier 2 cards under the tier 1 cards and put them on the appropriate spot on the guild board, making sure that all the cards are sink side up. Finally, each player will take an identical set of crew cards. Then take money based on your starting tile. You'll also receive skiffs, outposts, and guild trackers of your color. Place your guild tracker on each of the guild tracks, and place your starting tile connected to the hub board. Place 1 of your skiffs on the skiff starting space, then the rest of your skiffs are placed on your board as are your outposts. Place a toxicity tracker on the leftmost spot of your board and keep your guild seal tokens close. On a player's turn, they will play 1 of their crew cards from their hand and do the action that's printed on it. You cannot get that card back into your hand until you play the captain card, which will return all of your cards back into your hand. Let's have a quick look at a crew card. Each crew card is double-sided. It will have a guild icon, if it's part of a guild, and a tier. The card will explain what it does and will have a sale value if it's on the sink side of the card, or an income value if it's on the sky side. So let's quickly go through the cards. When you play a card, if you want to move your skiff, you can move it up to the movement points on the card before you take the action. If you're on the sky side, you'll receive the amount of income as shown on the card. The speaker's card allows you to gain influence with either one guild or a few guilds. Move your guild tracker that many spaces on that guild. Each guild will also give you bonuses as you land or pass certain squares. If you land on a card spot, you'll take the top guild card and add it to your hand. Every time you pass the starting position, add 1 of your seals to that guild. The trader cards grants you transactions. A transaction can be one of the following. If you're on the sink side, you can buy an additional skiff and add it to your starting skiff tile. Just pay the amount as indicated on your player board. A transaction can also be to place an outpost on a tile that has a construction site on it. You can then claim one of the objective cards and score that many victory points. The top 2 cards in each objective stack can only have one person claim the victory points from them. Then they are discarded, but the 3rd card in each stack can be claimed by multiple players multiple times. The last transaction you can do is buy or sell resources. You can buy or sell as many of one resource for a transaction by paying or receiving the amount shown on the guild board. After, you adjust the marker up or down based on the number of barrels you bought or sold. You cannot buy and sell the same resource on the same turn. Resources on your skiffs are considered cargo and cannot be sold. You must move the ship to the home tile to drop the resources off and move them into reserve from where you can sell them. The Founder's card allows you to draw tiles from the bag to place. Any tile that has a toxicity marker on it, even if you do not place it, you must move your toxicity tracker. If the tracker ever reaches the end, move your other token one spot and reset the toxicity tracker. Each ocean tile has a depth, and when you place the new tile, it must be placed in a valid position so it matches the depths of the connected tiles, or there's only a difference of 1. There are artifact wedges on some tiles, and if you place a tile that completes a circle so that all the same color, you draw an artifact out of the bag and get the reward printed on the artifact tile, then you place it face down on the guild board matching its color. The Delvers allows you to dive and get resources. Collect the dice as outlined on the card and a die matching the depth for each skiff on a non-depleted tile. Roll the dice and get the indicated resource. This side means you found a resource. Take 1 barrel and add it to the skiff on that space. Each skiff can hold a maximum of 4 barrels. This side means you take 1 toxicity. This is a depletion icon. For each one showing, you must deplete one of your tiles where you have a skiff. You can no longer dive on this tile. This is moving the survivor track and getting any bonuses you land on or pass. This is the radar icon. Treat it as if it had the same symbols as the current position on the radar track. The Scholar card allows you to copy any other player's card they have just played. And finally, the Captain card. It allows you to take all of your played cards back into your hand. When you play the Captain card is when you can decide to go skyside. So let's assume that you've gone skyside, so let's talk about that side of the game. When you decide to go skyside, you'll remove all your skiffs from the game. You will receive money back for the ones you've deployed based on the docks tile and when you go skyside. Any resources from those skiffs are added back to your reserve. All of your outposts on non-starting tiles are returned to the game box, both the outposts and the tiles. All the rest of your ocean tiles are added to your reserve and flipped over. Finally, you may build as many tiles as printed in the docks tile from your reserve at this point. Now I'm going to quickly point out some differences in the skyside cards. The Captain, Scholar, Speaker, and Traders work basically the same. The Founders allow you to build some of your tiles. You're still going to be drawing tiles from the bag as printed on the card, but you can build any tile from your reserve. Each skyside tile will have a cost in resources. Pay that and add the tile to your flotilla. You will then score points, and this is a bit tricky. On the newly played tile, you will score the matching colored guild tile. So if I place a yellow district, I'll be looking at the yellow dial, and then I'm going to add the number of buildings of that district color on my entire watercraft. The watercraft is a group of areas completely surrounded by water. They do not have to be all the same color district. So, you've added the dial to the buildings, and this total can never exceed 4. You multiply that by the number of like-colored tiles that are contiguously connected to the new tile without any breaks. The other card that operates slightly differently is the Delvers. Instead of the diving dice, you'll be rolling the skyside dice and trying to get resources. This side is going to gain you 4 coins. If you roll 3 or more of these symbols, you can move a guild dial 1 spot. If you roll 3 or more of these like-colored guild symbols, you will gain all the bonuses from that guild on the guild board. This is a wild guild symbol and will count as one of the colored guilds, but it can only be used once and only for one colored guild. The game ends when all the victory points are taken. Finish up the current round so that all players have the same number of turns. If you need to gain more victory points, you're going to be taking them from the reserve. Finally, you will score 1 point for every 5 coins you have left over, 1 point for every 2 resources remaining. Then you will gain or lose points based on your position on your toxicity track. Then you evaluate each guild. The person with the most seals will get 10 points, and the second most will get 5 points. Then the player with the most points is the winner. Now I've skipped over some rules to kind of keep this walkthrough shorter, but hopefully this has given you a good enough understanding of how the game works. So let's get back to see what I thought about Flotilla. So let's first talk about theme and components. You know what? I really enjoyed the theme. The idea of being a captain of a number of skiffs and sending them out to dive for resources, I don't know, it just worked for me. Even when you went skyside, the idea of building up your communities just worked. The cards made sense for their actions, so overall, you know what, good use of a very interesting theme. So now on to the components. These were mostly a hit, but there were a few misses for me. As you saw from the overview, there's a lot of components. The cards are good quality, and I did like the art. They were easy to read. I also really liked that the cards not only had the symbols, but also outlined what the card did in text. This means that there were very few times we needed to clarify a card for a player that they were holding. You know, all the information is right on the card itself. The wooden components are good for the most part, but here's where I do have some issues. The skiffs are all different for every player, which is a really nice touch, but I do feel they should have made them so they can easily place 4 barrels on them. I mean, if that's the maximum, why not make the ship big enough to store them? Because you need to be storing them on your skiffs because you can't take them off until you unload them. And the barrels themselves, you know what? I never realized how far little cylinders can roll until you drop one. I know they're thermatic. I always thought of them like barrels of oil or something like that, but practically, you know what? Maybe I would have preferred cubes. The cardboard components are good. The ocean tiles are easy enough to read and all the other bits are fine. Overall, no complaints about the components of the game. Now, one thing I do have to mention is the rulebook. This is where the game components really could use some work. There are a few mistakes in the book, but you know what? Nothing major. But on your first playthrough of the game, you'll probably want to get the FAQ and errata file from Board Game Geek. Now, I didn't do that and we still managed to play, so it's not vital, but it would have made life a little easier. Now, there's also an errata for some of the components that rebalance the game, and I would recommend getting that errata as well. Maybe not necessary for your first game, but it will probably help in the overall long run of the game. Now, the layout of the rulebook was a little all over the place. You want to know how to move your skiff? You know what? There's 2 areas for that, and neither one of them really kind of makes sense. What do symbols on all the artifacts mean? You know what? Sometimes you're just going to have to deduce it for yourself. Now, it could also be that there are a fair number of little rules in this game that the rule book is as it is, but I do think it could have been better laid out. Now on to the gameplay. Now I'm going to start off by saying I did enjoy this game, but I do have a few problems with it. One is specifically for your first play. The game is kind of a hard nut to crack, both to learn and to teach. There's a lot of interacting mechanisms in the game. For example, the sonar track. Now I quickly glossed over it in the overview, but when you're sinksiders, there's kind of nothing you can do to affect that track. If you roll it on a dive die, you just kind of get the negative. It's not till you're a skysider that can you manipulate that track and you can actually score points for manipulating the track. Or the guild dials. You don't care about them when you're on the sink side because it doesn't affect you. It's not until you flip over to the sky side and start building out your districts that you start to understand that part of the game. And that scoring for the districts is probably more complicated than it needs to be. Now, this may not sound like a negative for people that enjoy heavier games, but it's definitely a barrier you have to get to really kind of enjoy the game. Your first play or two can be frustrating because you may not see all the interconnections of the game. I've had games where even halfway through the game, people kind of felt lost at the table and didn't really understand what or why they were doing what they are doing. But it does click. And when it does click, it is fun, but it takes some time. And time, for me, is another negative of the game. Although I do like the game, every time I play the game, I feel that it's just a bit too long. Usually in the last half hour or so in the game, I'm kind of ready for it to be done. Not because I'm bored, but because it's usually by then people have their engines pretty much worked out. Now all you're doing is kind of triggering them every couple rounds to collect those last few victory points to end the game. The box says 90 minutes to 2.5 hours. I found most of my gameplays between 2 and 3 hours each. It feels just a bit too long. I've thought about reducing the number of victory points, but I can't figure out how to do that without messing up that flipping of the sink side to the sky side of the board. Now for the things I liked about the game. The main card mechanism of the game works really, really well. Often it's not just playing a card, but making sure you have everything set up to play that card. You want to dive? Make sure your skiffs are on spots where you want them to be. You want to trade? Make sure you've got the money to do fully what you want. I mean, having more skiffs is useful, but getting those outposts out is important. But for the outposts, make sure you can maximize your objectives. Now, one other thing I skipped over is placing those outposts. You can play extra to put them on a tile that doesn't have a construction site. So you never kind of block from placing one out. It's just going to cost you more money. And maybe later in the game, that's an avenue you want to go down. And again, although there's no direct player interaction, a lot of the game is watching what other people are doing and reacting accordingly. If someone is diving for a lot of red barrels because the prices for them is high, you know, can you swoop in and maybe sell a few and knock down the price before it crashes? Because that market is very interesting, but also very volatile. Or there's the end of game objective. If you see someone working towards the same one you are, can you get it before they do? Or even the scholar card, the one that allows you to copy another person's top card, is a very important card for player interaction. If someone gets a really good guild card, maybe that you missed out on, Well, maybe you can copy it using the scholar card. You know what? This is the type of player interaction in games I really enjoy. Not direct, but what other people are doing is affecting you. But by far, my most favorite aspect of the game is the decision point of when, or even if, you should flip over to the sky side. I love that decision point of the game. You need to be watching the market. If everything is really cheap and no one has gone sky side, am I ready to kind of make that flip? Or if several players are already flipped, have I left it too late, or can I ramp up my production since the barrels are much more valuable now, and maybe I can just buy the objectives I need to win? Really, really good. I never felt that I had the perfect time to swish. It changes every game, and I will say that every game I've played, now I've always made the flip, and maybe that's just me, but I've also found there's usually at least one player who never switches. That idea of getting lots of money for your barrels is very tempting. And you know what? People that have stayed have won, so it's definitely a viable strategy. The other real positive for the game is the replayability. All the times I've played, I've never found myself kind of falling to the same old rut. I really felt each game was different. A big reason for that is the scoring objectives that change every game. You need to be building towards these early on, as they are the main ways to get points. Now, I like that they give you some direction to be going in, and there are 11 sets of 3 objectives, and each set is double-sided, so 22 objectives overall. There's a high level of replayability. So, would I recommend this game? You know what? Yes, I would. And it ended up being a really enjoyable game. I liked the main card mechanism. I felt engaged for the entire game watching what the other players were doing. The changing objectives from game to game meant I approached the game differently each time. And that flip to the sky side, oof, I love that decision. Yes, there are a few niggling problems. The rulebook and the barrier to entry is high. The overall game length seems, I don't know why, it just seemed a bit too long. And the player count, it definitely benefits from the higher player count, and unfortunately there is no 2-player option. Other than that, go out and get this game. I think you're going to enjoy it, and that's why I'm giving it the Dice Tower seal of approval. And that's it for the moment. Until next time, thanks for watching.